morning, this is Angela with Parker's Permaculture. Welcome back for Hausfrau Friday. This is a segment on my permaculture YouTube channel where I talk about sustainable domesticity. I got a request to talk a little bit more about mending. I had spoken in some other videos about sustainable fashion and how when we are thinking about creating a life built around permaculture principles and trying as best we can to embrace resilient living, that our garments are a huge part of that. So much of our focus can be pushed toward sustainability in terms of food production, but our fiber production and our fiber utilization is also a really key component. The amount of pressure and impact that we have on the environment because of our clothing, and the amount of potential to either harm or benefit people through the production and acquisition and then disposal of our clothing is really, really high. And a key way that we can reduce harm when it comes to our clothing is to learn the skills of mending. These are really basic skills that folks in generations past perhaps were taught in home economics. I know when I was in high school in the 90s that I didn't have to take home economics. I actually took jazz band instead because there was not a requirement to take a home ec. It was just one of many electives that you could participate in. So I opted not to because I already knew how to cook thanks to my mother insisting that I learn at a young age. And I was not interested in any of the other aspects of home economics, despite being really crafty as a kid. So I skipped that and had to come back later in college and in my early 20s and learn how to mend, learn how to do things like add a zipper, learn how to do things in terms of altering garments, in terms of so much of the sewing that I use on a daily basis, and learning how to not only put together a garment, but how to alter one and how to repair one so that it has a very long life that benefits everybody and benefits the planet. Those were skills I acquired in my 20s and I have used for the last 20 years. They are invaluable skills. So when I first learned how to mend, a lot of the focus on mending was learning to do it invisibly. The idea is that you should repair a garment in a way that nobody knows it's been repaired if possible. And so a lot of my early mending was focused on darning with matching yarn, was focused on patching or repairing garments in a way where I might actually steal from the facing to get matching fabric to patch something. I focused on making sure I would find buttons at the thrift store that matched the ones that were already on the garment as best as I could possibly find. So nobody knew that my old thrifted clothing had been mended and remended and remended. And I understand that. I understand there's a lot of classism. There's a lot of judgment in wearing old clothes that are repaired over and over. And there is such an emphasis in our fast fashion culture on having new items every season. My neighbor's dog is going to bark through this whole video. I hope it's not too distracting to y'all. It's an ongoing issue. So for me, learning how to mend invisibly was really valuable. And it helped me have some more pride in the fact that I was wearing thrifted clothes, that I was wearing clothes that were several years old. If I couldn't have new clothing because that didn't fit with my beliefs about sustainability, it didn't fit with my ethics, I could keep the clothing that I had looking good and in good repair. That felt like a way that I was caring for the planet. I was keeping clothing out of the waste stream, and I was making sure that no new resources were consumed in the production of new garments because I was making my shirt last, well, I've had this one for at least 8 or 9 years and I bought it at the thrift store for $0.25. So I felt really good about that. But as the years have gone on, more and more I have looked at visible mending as a way to communicate sustainability. That mending is not only the practice of making sure that our garments last longer and stay in good repair, but it is also somewhat of a radical act in a culture that says we don't mend, we don't take care of our things, we don't take them to a tailor to have them altered or mended, we don't bother to go through the work of popping off a collar or cuffs and replacing them with new ones when they get worn. We just throw it away. We just throw it away and we go and we buy a new one. We live in a culture that really emphasizes that cheap fashion makes it much more cost effective to us as the consumer, but much more expensive to the planet and much more exploitive of our underpaid garment workers to go and just throw something out and buy a new one next season. Or even donate it to the thrift store, where the vast majority of garments actually end up in the dump or end up shipped overseas where they become somebody else's garbage. If you can mend something visibly, you are communicating that we should, 1, normalize the process of mending our clothes. 2, we should normalize keeping our clothes for longer. And 3, that mending is a good and beautiful thing. It is not something that should be hidden or disguised. For me, as the years have gone on, I have been much more into visible mending. And I've really appreciated during the pandemic that visible mending has become much more trendy. Like, yes, I think we totally should say, you know what? I want my patches to be obvious. I want to make sure this hole is embroidered with something big and bright and shiny and beautiful, instead of trying to make it blend into the fabric. I want to have an obvious patch, because what I want to communicate is that this garment is loved, it is worn, it is repaired, and it can continue to live for many, many more years. Visible mending is a way that we can communicate and educate about sustainability. It is not only a badge of honor, a badge of pride to say, I am not embracing fast fashion, I'm rejecting it, I am focusing on sustainable fashion and sustainable living. I am focusing on building skills of repairing and maintaining my clothes, but it is also saying, let's normalize and honor and celebrate mending in a way that becomes beautiful and artistic and is an expression of the homemaker, of the garment owner, of the repairer. So let me show you some of the mending I've been doing this week with 4 children. And the fact that we're often buying used clothes to begin with, or I have bought something at the thrift store and cut it down and turned it into a different garment. And because we don't have large wardrobes to begin with, I do a lot of repairing. I love mending. It's a quiet activity I can do by hand in the evening when I'm listening to a podcast. Perhaps my husband is reading aloud from a chapter book to the younger children. It's something I can take with me while I'm sitting in the waiting room at a doctor's office, where I'm taking perhaps my father to an appointment. It's something I can take with me. I keep either a basket of knitting, a basket of darning, or a basket of mending with me all the time, so that when I have downtime, I can be productive. So let me show you some of the pieces I've been working on this week. I have been repairing a skirt of Ruth's that she snagged on a rose bush at work. And I've been repairing a skirt of mine that I actually damaged 10 years ago. And then I just put it in storage because I thought, well, I'll just use this fabric for something else. But now my daughters want to use that skirt. And so I thought, I'm actually going to mend this. I'm going to mend it in a way that is visible, that communicates that mending itself is an art form. It is something that can add beauty to a garment. And just because it's gotten some holes doesn't mean it's at the end of its life. It means it is having an evolution in its beauty. So I hope that you will watch really quickly, and I'll come back at the end. So when I've got a rainy afternoon, I pull out my sewing kit. You can see inside I have a little housewife and all of the patches and other materials I will need for this project. Here is Ruth's skirt, which I got at the thrift store for her a number of years ago. You can see she snagged it on a rose bush at work. There is a right angle to this tear, but it is very, very close to the narrow hem. So as I looked at it and thought, well, how am I going to best patch this? I decided that doing a 2-sided patch that folded over the edge of the hem and completely encased the L-shaped tear would be the best bet. So I picked a piece of floral print from the thrift store out of my fabric stash, and I made a patch. Here you can see I am placing the folded edge of the patch where the hem of the skirt is, flipping it up, pinning it, and then I am whip stitching around. Now I took the raw edges of the patch and I folded them in a scant 1/4 inch. I just used my fingernail to press it. I didn't use an iron because this fabric was pretty agreeable to folding with just a finger press, but you may want to iron your edges in. That way I have no raw edges on my patch. I find sewing to be really meditative and soothing. I tend to do it when I am watching the news or listening to a podcast. I have my needle threaded here and I'm ready to go. Speaking of thread, I pretty much exclusively use thread from the thrift store. I have no problem finding Gooderman thread at my local thrift store, and I don't feel that it's within my budget to go buy new thread all the time, especially when I can get it for a quarter or 50 cents a spool at the thrift store. So I take what I can get. I know a lot of people tend to buy new thread, high quality linen thread online. Those can run as much as $16 a spool, and it's just not in my budget. I'm going to use what I have and keep resources out of the waste stream. So here I am adding this big obvious patch to the hem with a little bit of interruption from poodles who tend to get frustrated when I give my attention to my handwork instead of to them. So I'm just going through here and I am carefully whip stitching around the edge. I'm just picking up maybe 2 threads from the dark purple fabric. I don't want any of my stitches to show. Even though this is a patch, I still try and use it as an opportunity to have exceptional sewing technique and work on making my stitches ever smaller when I can. I know that mending is an opportunity to build skills. It is an opportunity to make my hand sewing even better because it is practice. I am by no means a hand sewing purist. I do a lot of sewing on my 2 sewing machines. I have an electric machine and a treadle that I got off of Craigslist. But I do love hand sewing. There is a level of finesse and a level of detail and a level of control that you get with hand sewing that you can't really get with a machine. I also really love the portability of it. As I said at the beginning of this video, I can take it with me. As a parent of 4 kids and a caretaker for my father, I frequently spend time waiting for other people to finish appointments or classes. I have those moments of downtime where I can pick up my mending and sew for 5 or 10 or 20 minutes. I can't do that if I'm doing all of my repairs on a sewing machine. Is my mending perfect? No. Is it always following textbook technique? Absolutely not. But for me, I love having those visible patches. They are a reminder to me every time I put on a garment that I am committed to sustainability, that I am actively choosing to step out of consumer culture and try and embrace sustainability in any small way. Now here is the skirt. I think this is a J. Jill skirt that my sister gave me and I wore for several years, and then I snagged it in 3 places pretty epically. It's a very, very thin, gauzy cotton with 2 underlayments in it, and I snagged the outside layer and the first layer of the underlayment. So I decided for the gauzy layer that I would take some little bits of leftover linen for making a chemise. This is a very thin, delicate linen, and I would stabilize the fabric. Lately, I've been seeing an uptake in interest in the Japanese mending technique of sashiko, which traditionally is an indigo fabric patch and a white thread that is used for visible and decorative mending. So I'm going to do kind of a riff on that because I think that is a good option for stabilizing the front of a frayed, gauzy fabric. So I'm going to put this patch on the back and then do a visible embroidery floss mend that is sort of an homage to sashiko on the front. Once again, I am using tiny stitches and I am trying to pick up here 1 thread of the print fabric as I go along so that my stitches don't show from the front. While I am going to do visible embroidery floss stitches on the front side of the garment, I don't actually want this little linen patch to be obvious, so I'm being very careful to take tiny stitches and again just pick up 1 thread or maybe 2 threads from the floral print fabric. While I have stabilized the fabric with the linen patch on the back, you can still see all of this frayed material on the front and some of the linen patch poking through. This is an opportunity for me to take out that embroidery floss and go ahead and stitch around. So I borrowed some peach and pale pink embroidery floss from my daughter's stash and made large stitches on the front of the fabric. I wish I had chosen two more contrasting colors because I really wanted those alternating rows of pink and peach to pop. I should have maybe chosen a deep wine instead of the peach, but overall I am happy with the outcome of this project. I have stabilized the fabric and given this skirt a new life. Every time we wear these garments, we have a visual reminder that we are striving to live a more sustainable life and that we are choosing to live our values. I know that patches like this can seem like such a tiny thing, but to me, they are such an important reminder that I need to continue to strive to live for my values. Even in a world that sometimes feels really opposed to them, I can decide to do better. So thanks for watching Hausfrau Friday today. Please check out my Patreon down below, and I will be back tomorrow. I have a video I've spent quite a bit of time working on this week that is coming out tomorrow that's on lessons I wish I had learned earlier as a gardener and as a permaculturist. So I hope you will tune in tomorrow. Make sure that you click like and subscribe to get more permaculture content from me here in my permaculture garden in Portland, Oregon. Thanks.